Hi, everyone. This is Jess from Your Inner Vitality. And today we have a very special guest. His name is Chris, and I would love for you guys to be able to get to know a little bit more about him before we dig into the topic of judgment. All right, Chris, tell us a little bit about who you are and what do you do?
Yeah, great. Well, Jess, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here today. This is really fun. So my name is Chris Lemig. I'm a transpersonal hypnotherapist, and that's a big word. Basically, it just means that I'm well, for one thing, it's a hypnotherapist, so that's a little interesting. But a transpersonal hypnotherapist helps people to kind of find their way through their issues and problems and make changes in their life based on not only their subconscious and subconscious minds, but also incorporating their kind of their spiritual self, their soul self, the superconscious mind as well.
Mhm.
And I began as a hypnotherapist a few years ago. I have a practice called True Nature Hypnotherapy, and I'm just really loving this practice.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your schedule today. I know that you work with clients one on one and you also offer workshops. So you squeezed us in today. And I just, when we last spoke, I was very enamored, like just taken by your story and your kind of your journey. And I think the listeners would really, be valued by hearing a little bit of where you came from if you were open to it.
Sure, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd love to. Yeah, part of my part of the reason why I kind of chose this profession of hypnotherapy and helping people one-on-one is a direct result of my journey.
Mm,
And because my journey is not dissimilar to a lot of the people that I work with. In fact, most of the people that I work with. And specifically, I come from a background of, for many years, I struggled with addiction and alcoholism and depression and a lot of, like a lot of helpers and healers, we have our own experience of
I do.
very things that we're helping people work through. And
Yeah.
ideally we're in process and along the way in the process of healing ourselves so that we can then be adequate guides for people to help them through their briar patches of all these sometimes difficult issues. So for many years I struggled with all that stuff, and then in 2007 just had a wake-up call, and I
Mm,
really, it was sort of like a life or death kind of judgment call where it was like, I have to stop this or I'm not going to be around for much longer. And
yeah.
so I made the decision to really, fortunately, really step onto the path of recovery. And at the same exact time, I got into Buddhism, and that just sent me off on this totally like 180-degree turn in life. So I went from
Yeah.
bartender, party guy to Buddhist monk, literally.
Yeah.
Eventually that's what happened. So I picked up a book on Buddhism. I found myself in India a year later, and I kept going back to India for study, for meditation practice, for learning more about my tradition, teachings, receiving teachings from the Dalai Lama and other great masters over there. And eventually I did take ordination as a Buddhist monk. So,
Mm.
and spent 2 years studying in monasteries and studying the teachings of Buddhism. So I came back in 2016 after that wonderful experience, and
Yeah.
just decided that it was more appropriate for me to just be a layperson, so a regular just kind of guy. And so I gave back my ordination vows. And if you see a picture of me somewhere, you'll see that I kept the haircut though. So I kept
Symbolic, of course.
symbolic. Yes, absolutely. So gave back the robes, but kept the bald head. Um, and and then I found stumbled into hypnotherapy as being a
Yeah.
really natural outgrowth of all the things that I had been studying, practicing, and learning over the past 12 or 13 years. Working with the mind, working skillfully with emotions, finding solutions to human suffering through contemplation and self-inquiry and spiritual practices. And hypnotherapy, and transpersonal hypnotherapy in particular, was just a perfect marriage of all that, and
Mm.
gave me taught me real powerful, transformative techniques to be able to help people work through their stuff.
Yeah. The irony is, and I didn't plan this, I'm
Mm.
actually reading Think Like a Monk by Jay Shetty,
Mm,
and
okay.
who also studied Buddhism as well. So it's ironic that you and I are actually chatting today as I'm reading the book. I didn't do that deliberately, but
That's great.
it is one of those things that just really does. The mindfulness is really important too. And
Mhm.
I feel like
Mhm.
with the practice that you're doing with the hypnotherapy now, even as well, is kind of a pairing to mindfulness as well.
Yeah, it's definitely, part of hypnosis can be about, focused awareness, focused attention.
Mm,
And we're focusing very deeply on whatever it is that's coming up, whatever it is that we're working with, whether it's an emotion or a memory or a
yeah.
process, and just staying with that instead of just sort of, letting it just slip on by like we do with our normal everyday consciousness.
Yeah, I just attached to that word holding because it
Hmm.
is like, holding that space for yourself. And
Hmm.
something that I do for my clients is holding that space for them in
Right,
times when they're needing it the most. Sometimes they don't even give themselves that space to work through what it is that they're working
right,
through. And,
right.
your journey of what you're going through, what you had gone through, and
Hmm.
what brought you here is similar to a catalyst of mine, not necessarily Buddhism, but it's the same
Hmm.
kind of, you had a catalyst that moved you
Hmm.
into what it is
Right.
that you did, right?
Right, right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. Holding space is such a big part of it. I was actually just got finished with a client now, and as we were going through his process, I recognized that, I do this a lot. There's a lot of me just being quiet. There's a lot
Yeah.
of me just being there, uh, and just every once in a while saying something like, "That's right, that's right." Just stay
Hmm.
with it. Just stay with it. And that's
Yeah.
all I have to do. And we have within ourselves just incredible capacities for healing, for understanding. So all we need sometimes is just a guide and a little bit of help and support, and we can do it all.
I giggle because I feel like the podcasts are the place where I actually talk the most.
Yeah.
When it comes to clients, I may say a total of like 10, 20 words in a session, depending, that's
Right.
their space to just let everything out, whether
Yeah.
it's verbal or nonverbal. I don't know.
Mhm.
I'm sure you get that as well with
Right.
your sessions too, with your clients.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
So I want to bring us to judgment.
Okay.
And, I feel when it comes to judgment, I feel that this is something that I see a lot through my client sessions. And I don't know if that is something that comes across with you in your sessions at all. Do you see judgment at all come through with your clients?
Every single one of them.
I was expecting something like that. Chris,
It was
do
a
tell
trick
me
question.
more. Yeah,
It was a trick question, wasn't
yeah.
it?
Tell me more about what it is that you see come across with your clients when it comes to judgment.
Absolutely. So I don't want to say all because I never use absolutes, but but almost all
Yeah.
of the folks that I work with, all of their issues, whether it be some sort of behavior, some sort of unhealthy behavior, an addiction, a problem emotional state like stress, anxiety, PTSD, you know, all of these emotional states are rooted in toxic shame, which
Mhm.
is essentially the ongoing belief that we're not okay, that there's something wrong with us. So it's
Yeah.
this sort of perpetual, underlying, sort of continuous static white noise that colors everything in our life. There's always this message that's under the surface, just saying you're no good, you're broken, why even try? You
Yeah.
should
Not enough.
hurt yourself. You're not enough. You're not good enough. Why even try to do that? So that's at the root of many issues. In fact, almost all. And so it really is about a misjudgment of who we actually are.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
A misjudgment of who we are.
Yeah, because we're not any of that. We're not no good. We're not broken. Never were, and never are, never will be.
Yeah.
And all that stuff is just, it's story. It's not just because it's very powerful. I'm not discounting it. It's extremely
Yes.
powerful stuff that we experience. But it's stories. It's stories that we've learned and that we've internalized. We got it from somebody else's uh, BS story.
Yep. Yeah.
who gave it to us, and we carry it down. It's like a lineage. It's like
Oh, man.
a legacy,
Yeah. It's a heavy backpack.
Right,
And you
right.
just keep adding to it.
Yeah, yeah. And each experience, we kind of, it's all becomes self-fulfilling prophecy, right? We're just, every
Yeah.
time we're like, we fail at something. Yeah, see, I'm no good. I told myself that a million times. Why did I believe this time would be different? Of
Yeah.
course I can't do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and it's in a way it's tragic, but it's also when it gets to the point where people come to me or you or whoever they're coming to, it's such a wonderful opportunity. It becomes an opportunity now. Like,
Yeah.
it's sort of like, that's sort of like, it's enough is enough. I don't want to do this anymore, because we fundamentally know that all that stuff is not true.
Yeah.
Stuff we've been telling ourselves, it's never been true. And we're always moving towards, in one way or another, whether slowly or quickly, we're always moving towards the recognition and the sort of the reconnection with our own inner purity, our own inner wholeness, our completeness, just as we are. So every action is really moving us towards that. It just, sometimes it takes a while to get there.
It's a learning process. And I find that we're not always fully aware that we're doing what we're doing, or we're saying what we're saying to ourselves. And I think that's the other power of being able to connect with someone like yourself or myself, where we can be that outsider looking in, and something that we call in coaching is mirroring. And so I can mirror them, and I can
Right.
also repeat what it is that they say.
Right.
And they don't even realize that they say these things even out loud to themselves about certain situations, people, places, things, whatever the triggers tend to be. But it's that drip effect. It's like a leaky faucet, just keeps dripping, keeps dripping, keeps dripping. Eventually they don't even hear the drip anymore.
Right.
But it's an everyday part of their life.
Exactly.
And that's a lot of water when you add it all up, right?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, like I say, it's sort of that white noise, that static that's
Yeah.
always there, that you just kind of tune out, and you don't realize that it's really coloring everything, every experience, And so there's that, that, we use a mundane example, a promotion comes up at work, and, you're qualified for it, but you just, automatically just say, no, that I can't do that, and maybe you don't say that in those words, but you follow through, because there's this, constant reinforcement, and that tape playing, that judgment playing. It's like, that's not something that's for me.
The reinforcement, I think, is also a powerful thing. And again, not always fully aware of them doing it. And you talk about you talked just a little bit briefly earlier about passing it on. Is even for myself with my daughter, not realizing that those types of innuendos, those cues that I do are picked up by her. And she carries those along. And it's the same with my clients. And you talk of, how they want to break the cycle and some of their experiences and what they're doing, but breaking the cycle. What do you think about that, actually? And this still comes in along judgment, but when it comes to breaking a cycle, we're habitual beings, and it's just, I don't want to say hard, because I'm always so very I'm so very cognizant of the words that I use, but that tends to be what comes from the clients, is that it's really hard to do this, to break their cycles.
Yeah. And that's just another cycle.
Oh my gosh, cycles upon cycles.
Yeah. So, and again, it's a story, it's a story that we're constantly, we're making it up as we go along, and reinforcing it over and over again. It's hard, it's difficult, it's, impossible. I'll never be able to, all these sort of things.
Yeah.
We don't really examine whether or not that's true.
Yeah.
So as far as breaking the cycle, so to speak, that's really the essence of Buddhism, to tell you the truth.
Yeah.
We're stuck in a cycle. We're stuck in this wheel of just going around and around and around with our delusions, our presuppositions, our habits, unexamined, and we're not recognizing our true nature. And so we get stuck in this wheel of suffering, essentially. So when we're talking about breaking the cycle, specifically of familial sort of, inheritance of neuroses, it's the same sort of thing. We're stuck, and until we're not. We're stuck until we recognize that we're at cause. Until we recognize that we're actually not that. We're not that problem. We're not that issue. We're pure being. We're pure inner goodness, the way to get there is often remarkably simple. It might take a while to get there, but really it's just about, slowing down enough. And in hypnosis is a wonderful way to do this. And I'm sure that actually that you, and during our talk, I recognize that you do hypnosis, whether you're aware of it or not.
Clients have no idea. No.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it's really just about sinking down deep enough so that we can stop analyzing and thinking and judging, and we can have a deep experience of who we are, which is just pure being,
Yeah.
So that's how the cycle is kind of broken, and it's broken moment by moment. It has to be this fresh awareness of I'm not that, I'm something else.
Yeah, a bit of that rewiring part.
Yeah.
You said something there that like that deep awareness of themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just even thinking of the clients that I'm coaching through currently, and there is a hunger for that. Like it is something that some of them have felt they've lost. They don't know who they are anymore. And that's what they're seeking is that deeper part of who they really are. And even the things that they were familiar with prior, they're taking some of those things out and trying them again that they hadn't done in a long time, and finding that that actually isn't them. Maybe it was then, but it isn't who they are now. And it's a discovery process, actually. And I think that's what I love about coaching so much is it can get really messy, but yet there's so many beautiful moments of that deep rooted discovery that they find. And when I have that in a session, it's just like zing, I don't know how that works for you, but I'm just like, oh, it's so nice. It's a privilege to actually be a part of that, because it usually does happen initially, I find, intimately within closed doors before it goes out into the world.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I mean, it's the same kind of process, that I work through with people, and kind of each session is like that. People will walk in at the beginning of a session, especially the first session, and there'll be lines of worry and fear and uncertainty and perplexed and I don't know what to do and throwing up their hands and and then we'll go through the muck and the mire and the icky stuff for a little while, and then we'll get to that breakthrough moment, where and it's built into the process of what I do to make sure that we're always reconnecting with that wholeness that we are, that innate goodness of who we are. And so we're always connecting with that. So we're never leaving with anything undone or unfinished. We're always reconnecting with that, moving forward, and then in between sessions, just continuing that process of developing that connection and letting go of the problems and cutting through the cycles and releasing the stuff that we don't need to hold on to anymore.
Yeah.
So it's a wonderful thing to see, like every single session is like this journey, and to just watch people just get lighter and lighter and lighter, and just be like, yay, I feel light too.
We feel that, like, as practitioners, if you're a client out there, someone, I'm telling you right now that your client, your coaches, hypnotherapists, all of those individuals, were feeling that from you guys when you're coming in. I feel the struggle when it comes to that too for them.
Yeah, it's a partnership, and it's a sacred partnership. It's a sacred bond, they're, my clients are allowing me into their circle, and I take that very seriously.
Yeah.
And I'm honored to do it. So,
yeah. When I'm thinking of judgment and the ability to be able to experience with my clients, is when they allow you to go in there, and that's that vulnerability of being in there and in the mess of it, to also find out what that judgment is that they're saying or doing with themselves. Because a lot of times they're masters of disguise. They won't let other people see or know what it is that they're experiencing or going through, or the reason that they didn't even bother applying for that job that you mentioned, or those types of things. To be able to expose them to us, I think is a gift.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And that makes me think just about one universal quality of recognizing the judgment. And once that becomes clear to them or to us, once we recognize that, oh, there's this judgment going on, and this is universal. Every time we begin to recognize it and then begin to really work with it and work through it, we see very clearly that it's all a lie. It's
Yeah.
all a lie. Like there's not a single bit of truth to any of the especially the negative judgments we have of ourselves, the
Yeah.
limiting judgments. They're all, BS,
All
So,
BS. But yet, in those moments where it seems so true,
mhm.
they carry so much weight. And then
Absolutely.
when you can create that space between that judgment and the client,
Yeah.
and the more that they do that on their own, and the
Mhm.
greater that space is between them. And you mentioned something earlier about slowing things down.
Mhm.
And I think
Mhm.
once they allow themselves to like slow the world down and
Yeah.
really be aware about what it is that they're saying or doing in
Mhm.
those moments and be
Yeah.
able to detach from it,
Right.
I think that's where the judgment loses its power
Right. Right.
over us, the
Yeah.
grasp, that tight grasp.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah.
I feel like we could talk about this forever.
It's the primary, it's our primary work, I think.
I think it is. It's what keeps me in business, everybody. So if you want to
Yeah.
keep that judgment going, we're going to stay in business, Chris and I. But
Yeah.
in all joking aside, one of the, what I was contemplating on just even thinking now as we're talking is what are some things that individuals can do
Mhm.
when they are working through judgment?
Yeah. Great question. And
Yeah,
the wonderful answer is there's like all kinds of things that we can do.
tons of
There's so
things.
many methods, and I only know a few, and I know there's so many out there that I'm learning, all the time. I'm
Yeah.
learning. I continue to take training and continue to learn from other people, all these wonderful ways of dealing with these self-recriminating judgments.
Mm,
And here's one technique that's really wonderful. So first of all, we want to cultivate a little bit of mindfulness, right? A little bit of awareness. So
mhm.
we just take, and that doesn't take a long amount of time. We can just start to notice, and we can, with our therapist or with our coach or with our healing professional, with a little bit of support there, we can just begin to just take a notice of how are we talking to ourselves in our heads.
Mhm.
What kinds of ways are we referring to ourselves? What kind of phrases keep coming up? What's the flavor and the emotional impact behind all this stuff?
Yeah.
And so once we have identified that, okay, I wouldn't talk to my worst enemy like this.
I know. I was like, man, they would never have that potty mouth against anyone else.
Right? If I heard a recording of this, and I'd be like, who was that? And I'm
Yeah.
gonna kick his butt. Um, so so identifying that first, recognizing it. And now here's where it gets really fun. So normally, that voice sounds really serious.
Yeah.
It's speaking from on high, and it's like, it's the truth, and it's just telling you how it is.
Oh,
And
it's the
you,
militant, person
you
in
are,
you.
right? You are just
Yes.
awful. And why even try? So what you do is right there when you notice it, change that voice into Daffy Duck.
So when we hear Chris talking in Daffy Duck, we know what's going on.
Right, exactly.
But
So
that's good.
exactly.
It's
It's
changing the energy, I feel like, when you do that.
it's instantly transformative. And
Yeah.
every time I do that, and you want to, when you're doing that, guiding a client to that, kind of keep it serious, and then like drop the Donald Duck thing or the Daffy Duck or the Porky Pig or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and then it instantly lightens the mood because the person, we imagine it immediately, whether we hear it or whether we just, kind of experience it, because we've all had, exposure to those kind of silly voices.
Yeah.
And we recognize it as being ridiculous. It's
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Mhm.
You're a terrible person. You're a terrible person. Chris,
I was
you're
like, come
just
on,
absolutely awful.
give it to me in Daffy, please.
Totally. Or the Artful Dodger or something, I mean, just go with it, go over the top. And every time you hear that message, whether it's a repeated message over and over again or just different ways of delivering it. Just change that voice into just something totally ridiculous, and you'll laugh. That's the first thing you'll do. And that breaks the spell, that breaks the trance right there.
Laughter.
And yeah, absolutely. So, and it does another thing too, on a more of a subconscious level, or maybe conscious too. You might recognize it consciously, but the implication is that, oh, I have power over this voice. I can change this voice. I have agency over this voice.
Yeah.
Interesting. Now, if I can
Shifting
make
the
it
powers.
right now, if I can make it sound like Daffy Duck, I wonder if I can make it say something different.
Yeah. You know, I was even thinking too, when we change the energy and where it's coming from, and even just by having, you know, Daffy a part of that process, it also brings it to our level of awareness too. Like, we are realizing more how much Daffy is talking throughout the day, you know, and it's bringing that level of consciousness. And it sounds like this is kind of like your first point. And then the next point is now having Daffy start to rephrase what it is that we're saying to ourselves.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So that's definitely the goal, you know, and to just recognize that we don't need we don't need to be talking to ourselves like that. That's not who we are. That's not even from us. That's not even what we really believe about ourselves. It's something that we got programmed a long time ago, and wherever it came from doesn't really matter. We can work on that. We can work on sources for sure, but it doesn't essentially matter. We can just change it in the moment and transform it into something else.
I think you say something powerful there too, is sometimes individuals think that they have to know what the source is before they can fix it. And that isn't always the case. Like, we can, but the other component is we want to really utilize and leverage their energy, their tools, their resources, and the here and now, and start making those changes here and now. And, you know, as little as a session, you can see some of those changes happen, but it is about the consistency of continuing to work on the here and now, which, you know, changes from moment to moment. As soon as you're here 10 minutes from now, that's a different moment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something else I was thinking of too, because, well, two things that you were mentioning there is another way is journaling their thoughts. And there's one method that I have some of my clients do is write a letter to themselves about themselves, of like what it is that is so good about themselves and why they deserve to have that worth, that love, that unconditional acceptance. And it could serve as a good reminder for them to go back and read it. Not always the easiest for them to write sometimes. In fact, that is where you could also have someone, your wellness professional, to help you through that process. There is another part that I love doing is visualizations. And I know you are big into meditation as well. And finding their inner leader, and what does that inner leader look like, feel like, and have that inner leader as a character, kind of like a Daffy Duck, where when something like this comes into place, is that you pull that inner leader out, and that inner leader is there to kind of remind you of that's not who you are. And when it comes to that replacement component, you know, that inner leader of yours, my inner leader, her name is Jessie. So she's usually in like, in my visualization, she's in overalls. She's pretty dirty because she's in the garden, and she's well rooted, and she's, you know, got the gray hair and all this wisdom. But, you know, even now as a coach, I have to pull her out every so often. She has to dust me off and say, hey, that isn't your garbage. You got to, you know, let that go, because Jessie doesn't live in that realm of judgment, right?
Exactly. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, you don't do hypnosis at all. Yeah.
Now I'm curious. That's funny. Well, you know, but I guess the power of visualization, I don't know if that's what you're speaking of, but
yes,
it holds a lot of power. And I guess you do a lot of that in your practice then, I'm assuming.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of visualization, a lot of guided experiences, finding those inner guides, you know, just, you know, letting them come up and letting them appear for us, making those deep connections so that then they're available to us, you know, at a moment's notice. Like you say, you know, you can just call Jessie and say like, okay, I need some help. Help me out here. And they're always there to help us. So yeah, it's beautiful. It's really nice. Yeah.
Even thinking of another tool, just when you're talking about pulling that tool out, is your breath. You
Mm-hmm.
have that wherever you
Yes.
go, and
Right.
just sometimes even just taking a couple moments to refocus on your breath
Right.
before moving into or walking away from a decision,
Yeah.
like the job opportunity, or saying no to something, or saying when you really wanted to be saying yes to that opportunity as well.
Right. Right. Exactly. Exactly.
Judgment holds us back. I don't
It
know. What
sure
do you think?
does. It sure does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's very narrow-minded. It's
Mm.
very fixated on just like one outcome. It's
Yeah.
limited. It doesn't have a lot of choices. It limits our choices. So yeah, absolutely, 100%.
It sounds like a really bland, boring meal.
It does. It does. It's the
I
same
know.
thing over and over and over again too.
Over and over and over again.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's funny. Well, Chris, before we kind of wrap this up, I don't know if there's anything else that you wanted to add to when it comes to judgment before we get to know a little bit more about what you got going on.
Sure. Sure. Yeah. I remind myself too,
Yeah.
I take my own medicine on this stuff, but, I want to remind everybody listening that, whatever negative judgments that you regularly make about yourself, and I just want to hammer this home, every single one of them is a lie. Every single one of them is untrue, 100%. It has no basis in reality. Who you are is perfectly pure, innately good, spontaneous, joyful creativity every single moment of your life. That's who you really are.
Mm-hmm.
And you can truly experience that, and you can be that because that's who you are. You couldn't be that if you weren't already that. So
Yeah. I'm thinking when you say that, with my coach's training, something that I even say now to my clients is, I hold you creative, resourceful, and whole. And
yeah,
that's what we are. We are
that's what
creative,
we are.
resourceful, and whole. We can do this. We can maneuver through any obstacle, even if it seems impossible.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Great.
Okay. I got a question for you, Chris. Are you
Okay.
ready?
Yep.
If you were an animal, what
Mhm.
would it be and why?
Otter.
Really? I would never. Got to tell me more about that. Why an otter?
So,
Love
so
it.
my outward personality, like probably, maybe gravitates towards some sort of other animal, like gray wolf or eagle or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah.
But man, the otters, if I go to like SeaWorld, I'm just hanging out with the otters. I just like, I want to just crawl in there with them and just float around with your little hands next to
It was
your,
just,
your
that's what
chest.
I'm
And
envisioning.
oh my gosh. So they've got it. They've got it down.
Well, thank you very much, Chris the Otter. I do appreciate that. And I appreciate the time that you've spent with us today. And, I would love, aside from me making sure everybody has your contact information, how can they get a hold of you? And what is it that you could, tell them to watch out for when it comes to you?
Absolutely. So yeah, the best way to kind of reach out is through my website, which is truenaturehypnotherapy.com. I've got a
Okay.
lot of information on there, a lot of resources about, not just the services I provide, but just hypnosis and hypnotherapy in general. There's links to articles and blog posts that I've done and things like that. There's also a way that if you wanted to set up a time to chat with me, one-on-one for free, we can do that and talk a little bit more about, what I offer. And I also do, workshops periodically. I do a meetup group called the Hypnosis Learning Center, and you can find that on the meetup website. And we do twice a month. We do either myself doing a workshop or another healing practitioner or hypnotist doing a workshop on some practical way that you can help yourself, with practical techniques to just live a happier and healthier life.
Yeah. And do you offer sessions for people that may not necessarily live close to you?
Absolutely, yeah. So I do
Yeah.
online sessions as well, and I have clients in California and Oregon and New York, and I worked with somebody from Vietnam recently. So
That is cool.
yeah, yeah.
The power of internet.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Not all, see, technology isn't all bad.
No, it isn't. It does cause us some frustrations and
A
can
little bit.
probably pull out some judgment because of it sometimes,
Yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
there is advantages like you and I being able to connect and talk today as well.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, Chris, before I let you go, is there anything else that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for having me. This has been a wonderful discussion, wonderful chat, and yeah, may it be of benefit for many months and years to come. And
Yeah.
may all of you out there just yeah, just continue to grow and to heal and to just be who you are.
Well, thank you so much, Chris. And I'm sure this will be not the last time that we connect and do things and collaborate together. So until then, I do wish you and your practice and all your clients the best.
Thank you.
You're welcome.